Have you heard of a bank breaking the whole financial system of its country? No, right? But today I'm going to tell you about a bank which you probably never heard of, which can break the global financial system. This is the second biggest bank of its country and has counterparties from all around the world, but most of you wouldn't have even heard about this bank before this. So, which bank am I talking about? Let's find out. The bank that I'm talking about is the Norinchukin Bank. It is Japan's second biggest bank, and according to Google, it supposedly serves agriculture, farming and forestry cooperatives, but it is not so simple. It is an investment bank which mostly invests in collateralized debt obligations, collateralized loan obligations, mortgage-backed securities, commercialized mortgage-backed securities, and bonds. In fact, between 2017 and 2019, it was such a big player in the CLO market that it was nicknamed as the CLO whale. All of these debt instruments fundamentally do the same thing, and that is bundle up thousands of loans together into one single package, which in theory diversifies your risk. But if you've seen the movie The Big Short, you would know that these were the very same instruments that caused the 2008 crash, and since then the nature of these instruments has barely changed, which means they are still trash, and the Norinchukin banks holds a lot of this trash in their books. Now, if they hold so much trash in their books, they should have surely gone bust in the 2008 crash itself, right? Yes, they did go bust in the 2008 crash, but back then they were a very small bank, and so the Japanese government decided to rescue them and bail them out. But let's forward to the current day situation. I looked at the bank's latest financial results for the quarter ending 31st December 2024, and I found some very interesting but not so great things. First, let's look at their balance sheet. I've marked some important items in the balance sheet which are worth looking at. If you look at the first point, you will see that the bank's securities portfolio has dropped from 43.8 trillion JPY in March 2024 to 35.6 trillion JPY in December 2024. They've sold off 19% of their investments in just 9 months. This is very huge for a bank because this is indicating that they are in a big need of cash. But the question is, did they sell these securities at a loss or a profit? We'll find out in just a second. The second point of concern is that the bank's deposits are also plummeting, and in the last 9 months of 2024, deposits fell by around 10%. Now, I would think that these deposits have fallen because investors have started to find out the deteriorated state of the bank. Now coming to the question posed in point 1, did the bank sell its securities at a loss or a profit? And the answer is hidden in the two items highlighted in the green. If you look at the point unrealized gains/losses on other securities, you'll see that the unrealized loss of 1.81 trillion JPY in March 2024 has decreased to only 0.88 trillion JPY. This is because the bank has sold off its securities and realized that loss, because of which it no longer remains unrealized, and thus there is a reduction in the figure. But how do I know that they've booked a loss and it's not an appreciation in the value of their securities because of which their unrealized losses have decreased? That's where the point of retained earning comes in. In the same period, the retained earning of the bank fell from 2.15 trillion JPY to 0.74 trillion JPY, which means that the bank is using its reserves to cover its losses. But for how long can this go on? And the last point is net assets. Net assets are basically total assets minus total liabilities. When a bank's net assets go below zero, that is when the bank becomes insolvent, because then it can no longer pay all of its dues back. Currently, Norinchukin's net assets stand at 4.6 trillion JPY, which means if they sell all of their securities at just a 15% loss, they'll become insolvent. And here's why it is not a big deal for that to happen. You see, the market for securities that Norinchukin holds in its books is not that liquid, which means if it tries to aggressively sell its securities in the market, it will highly depreciate the prices of those securities, bringing it well below the 15% mark of their buying price. Their business is going so bad that they've lost money in all of their departments except for one in the last quarter. As more and more customers get to know the dire condition of the bank, they will start to pull their money out of the bank. This will only exacerbate the issue because this will mean that the bank will need to sell even more assets which are already in deep loss to pay out these deposits up to a point where it will no longer be able to do so and collapse. But here's the big question. How is it a threat to the global financial system? The bank is a threat to the global financial system because many big banks have taken the other side of the trade with Norinchukin, and if Norinchukin goes bust, their money goes bust with it. But there's another thing that will happen when Norinchukin tries to sell its assets. You see, for assets with an illiquid market, banks get to decide the market price which they have to show in their books. Let's say I buy a mortgage-backed security at $100 and there's no active market for it. And so in my books, I can show that the current market price of it is $95, effectively only showing a $5 loss. But in reality, maybe nobody would want to buy that mortgage-backed security from me even at $80. And so this is a trick that banks use to hide their losses on their securities. But if all of a sudden Norinchukin comes and sells a lot of these securities in the market, effectively crashing their price, eventually other banks will also be forced to update the prices in their books, and this will spawn a huge amount of losses in the overall financial system. Now I can understand if you still don't believe that Norinchukin can be a threat to the global financial system, but just hear me out on this one. Why has Norinchukin Bank been added to the US Federal Reserve Standing Repo Facility, which provides liquidity to banks in need of it? Why is the US Federal Reserve providing liquidity support to a Japanese bank? Because it knows how important it is for that bank to not go bust. So when do the fireworks start and we get to see this spectacular giant fall? My bet is very soon because of two main reasons. First, the CEO of the bank just resigned a few days ago, and a CEO resigning at such a time is a huge red flag because even he knows that there is now no way to save this sinking ship. The second is a bit more technical, and it is the Japanese government bond yields. This is the chart of the Japanese 2-year government bond yield. Now, the 2-year government bond yield are a very excellent predictor of where the interest rates are heading in the near future. But why does this matter? Because Norinchukin is a big JPY carry trade player. But what is a JPY carry trade? It's where you borrow Japanese yen from the Bank of Japan at a very low interest rate, currently 0.5%, and invest it in other assets to hopefully yield higher returns than that. That is the most basic explanation of the JPY carry trade. However, if you want to know about the JPY carry trade in detail, I've already written a post about it on LinkedIn, which you can read through the link given in the description. But as the Bank of Japan increases interest rates going forward, the cost of borrowing will also increase, and that means Norinchukin will also need to pay more cost to borrow JPY from the Bank of Japan. And by more, how much more do we mean? Well, the Bank of Japan's interest rate at the end of 2024 was 0.25%, and in January 2025 they raised the interest rates to 0.5%, which means the cost of borrowing has already doubled, and we are expecting another 25 basis point rate hike which will take the interest rate up to 0.75% in the near future. This is not looking good for the good old Norinchukin, who is already bleeding from so many wounds. Okay, now that you know what's happening with Norinchukin, let me tell you what happens if Norinchukin implodes. As mentioned before, when Norinchukin tries to sell its securities, you will see a huge amount of losses spawning in the global financial system, and that never ends well, does it? But there's more to it. What happens after that depends on Bank of Japan. Will the Bank of Japan again come and rescue the Norinchukin Bank, or will it let the bank die? If the Bank of Japan does not come in and bail out the Norinchukin Bank, then hundreds of billions of dollars of losses will need to be borne by Norinchukin's counterparties, which, as I said before, are from around the world, which means even more havoc in the global financial system. But if the Bank of Japan decides to bail out the Norinchukin Bank, will the situation be any better? I don't think so, because if the Bank of Japan wants to bail out the Norinchukin Bank, then it will need to print a huge amount of JPY and put it in the financial system to pay for Norinchukin's dues. This will put a huge amount of pressure on JPY and greatly depreciate it, easily sending the USD JPY exchange rate above 200, and this will trigger a lot of inflation. To counter this, the Bank of Japan will need to raise interest rates even more, and this will amplify the carry trade unwinding, and that will result into all the risk assets being sold off greatly and a lot of pain in the market. Overall, the situation is not looking great at all. Going forward, I don't see any way in which things could get better, but all I would like to say is beware, the times coming soon are not rosy at all. As I've flagged in my articles and content, there are a lot of problems already going on in the financial system, and this will only add fuel to it. But what stays constant is the cycle of the market. The pain and the disaster that these entities will cause will be the very reason once in a lifetime opportunities pop up in the market. All you have to do is pick the diamonds up from the rubble when nobody is ready to touch them. See ya in another one.